Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're here today because I've got a story that's been sitting with me for a while now. One of those tales that just grabs your heart and doesn't let go. It's about loneliness, loss, and finding love in the most unexpected places. Picture this, the wild, unforgiving mountains of Montana back in the 1800s, where the wind howls like it's got a grudge and the snow piles up so high it could bury your dreams. That's where our story starts, with a man named Jedediah Holt. I've always been drawn to stories like his because, honestly, who hasn't felt that pull of isolation at some point? Like, maybe you've had a tough breakup or lost someone close, and you just want to shut the world out. Jed did that for 15 long years, and let me tell you, it's a story that reminds us how powerful it can be to let someone in again. So, let's dive in. Jed was 39, but he looked older. Those deep lines on his face weren't just from the harsh weather. They were carved by grief. He'd built himself a tiny cabin up in the Montana mountains, about 20 feet square, all log walls he'd notched himself from pines he dragged down the slopes. No frills, just the basics. A stone fireplace, a rough table, one chair he actually used, shelves with dried meat and herbs, and his rifles hanging above the door. Up a ladder was a loft with a straw mattress and fur blankets. Through the single glass window, he'd haul that glass all the way from Billings, no small feat. He'd watch the snow fall like it was trying to erase the world. It was 1879, but dates didn't mean much to Jed anymore. Time just blurred into this endless cycle. Wake up, chop wood, hunt, eat, sleep, and try not to dream. You know, Montana in winter is no joke. Even today, with all our tech and heated trucks, blizzards there can drop temperatures to bone-chilling lows. And back then, it was life or death. Jed had chosen this spot carefully, a south-facing slope shielded by a granite cliff with a spring that rarely froze and game trails everywhere. He was self-sufficient, or at least that's what he told himself. His only companion was his horse Thunder, a big black stallion who understood silence better than any human. Jed trusted Thunder because animals don't ask questions. They don't demand your story or your pain. And Jed had plenty of pain to hide from. 15 years earlier, back in Kansas, Jed had a different life. He was married to Mary, a woman with corn silk hair and a laugh that could light up a prairie Sunday morning. They were building a homestead, dreaming of a family. But then, tragedy struck. Mary was pregnant, and the baby came too early in the dead of winter. The frontier doctor showed up drunk and useless, too late to save her or the child. Jed dug their graves himself in the frozen ground while some preacher mumbled about God's plan. That night, he burned everything to ash, the house, the barn, their dreams, and rode west till the mountains swallowed him up. Can you imagine that kind of heartbreak? The kind that makes you question if love is just a setup for more loss? I think about it sometimes, how one moment can shatter everything. Maybe you've been there, staring at an empty room, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again. Jed decided he wouldn't risk it. No more connections, no more hurt. He became the hermit of Wolverine Peak, as the folks in Cedar Ridge called him, the nearest town 2 days' ride away through treacherous passes. He'd go there twice a year for supplies, ammo, salt, coffee, tobacco, whiskey. The townspeople learned not to chat. They'd cross themselves when he rode in, tall and lean, with his wild beard and gray-streaked hair. To fill the endless evenings, Jed carved wooden wolves. Always wolves. They'd pile up on the mantel, a silent pack, guardians of his solitude. Wolves mate for life, but hunt alone when they have to. They survive on instinct, wary of everything. Sound familiar? Jed saw himself in them, strong, independent, but forever howling at an empty sky. I'd like to think carving was his way of processing the grief, like how some people journal or paint. It's therapy without words. And in those quiet moments by the fire, with the flames dancing shadows across the walls, Jed's mind would wander to what he'd lost. The exact shade of Mary's hair fading in his memory. But the moment her eyes went dim, that was etched forever. Life up there was brutal arithmetic. Calories in versus calories out. Wood split against the cold ahead. No room for hope or faith. Those were lies as far as Jed was concerned. The mountains didn't promise anything. They just demanded strength. Avalanches, grizzlies, blizzards, they were honest dangers, not the sneaky kind like love that sneaks up and guts you. Jed had built a fortress against memory, and it worked, mostly. But have you ever noticed how solitude can be a double-edged sword? It protects you, sure, but it also starves something inside. I remember a time in my own life after a rough patch when I holed up alone for weeks. At first it's peaceful, but then the quiet starts echoing your regrets. Jed was deep in that echo when the storm hit. It was December, and this blizzard was a monster, what the old-timers called a widowmaker. Wind screaming, snow piling higher than a horse's back. Jed was inside, stirring venison stew from a buck he'd shot days before, when something felt off. Thunder was restless in the lean-to stable, and Jed's instincts kicked in. He'd lived in these mountains long enough to read the weather like a book. Stepping out into the gale, he checked on his horse, breaking ice on the water bucket, forking hay, but that unease lingered. The next morning, after the storm subsided to a moan, the world was transformed. Drifts like frozen waves, silence pressing in like deep water. Thunder's weenie pulled Jed outside again. The horse sensed something down in the valley. Jed saddled up, strapped on snowshoes, grabbed his rifle, and they descended through knee-deep snow. He knew every contour of that land like an old scar. An hour in, Thunder froze, nostrils flaring. Pushing through the pines, Jed found it. A stagecoach wrecked like a broken toy. Horses frozen in their traces, driver dead, passengers scattered. The strongbox burst open. Mail, packages, a child's wooden horse. But then a faint sound, almost human. Following it to a drift, he dug and found her. A woman, curled up, barely alive, in fine wool clothes that screamed city money. Her pulse was aflutter, weak, but there. Jed should have left her. Nature's way, right? Involvement meant risk. But his hands moved on their own. He lifted her, light as a bundle of wet fabric, and got her onto Thunder. The ride back was a battle against time, her breathing shallower with every step. Why save her? Jed couldn't say. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe deep down he wasn't as dead inside as he thought. Back at the cabin, he laid her by the fire, stripped her wet clothes, necessity over modesty, and wrapped her in his buffalo robe. Her name? He didn't know yet. But as he built up the flames, the cabin filled with the scent of lavender and rose, ghosts from another world. Hours later she stirred. Green eyes like spring leaves opened in terror. She screamed, scrambling back, clutching the robe. "You're safe," Jed rasped, voice rusty from years of silence. "Accident. Your coach." It took time, but the truth sank in. Everyone else dead. Charlotte Whitmore from Boston sobbed raw tears for the lost. Mr. Hartley, Mrs. Peyton, little James. Jed stood helpless, remembering his own grief, alone in that empty Kansas house. But witnessing hers, it cracked something in him. Charlotte was mid-20s, fine features, chestnut hair, born to comfort. Parasols and society balls. She was heading to San Francisco, she said, to an aunt. But Jed sensed evasion. Why run west alone? As the storm raged on, trapping them, she needed clothes. Jed gave her his flannel shirt and wool trousers. Too big, but she managed. Dignity restored, though she winced at the primitiveness. "This is intolerable," she'd say, Boston accent sharp. But hunger sharpened her appetite. She devoured his stew, surprised at how good venison with wild onions tasted. Tension simmered. She was an intruder in his sanctuary, disrupting his order. But as days blurred, something shifted. Charlotte wasn't fragile. She'd traveled west alone for months. She insisted on helping, learning to split kindling, set snares. Her first swing with the axe bounced off, but on the fourth, clean split. Triumph lit her face, and Jed felt his chest tighten. When had he last seen joy like that? Evenings by the fire, he'd teach her carving. Her attempts at a cat were misshapen, but she laughed, warm, unexpected. "Carving's not for ladies," he'd gruff. "Neither is fleeing marriages," she'd retort. You see, Charlotte was running from Richard Peyton, a business arrangement sealed when she was 16. Her father owed him money, marriage settled the debt. But Charlotte wanted more, freedom, not suffocation and silk. "I thought I could disappear, start over," she whispered one night. Jed understood. The West was full of reinventions. In turn, she drew out his story. "Tell me about Mary," she'd say gently. The words poured out. Their marriage, the farm, the pregnancy, the doctor's failure, the blood, the graves. I burned it all and rode west. For the first time, Sharon didn't destroy him. Charlotte listened, her green eyes holding no pity, just understanding. "Memories follow regardless," she'd say. Their touches lingered. A hand guided on a carving knife, a steadying arm after a slip in the snow. Electricity sparked. He fought it. Love meant loss. But Charlotte saw through him. "You're terrified of feeling alive again." Her words hit like truth. In the loft one night, amid her tears, he climbed up. "You're not alone," he said, holding her hand. Nothing more, but everything changed. The storm stretched. Food dwindled. Jed's stores for one, not two. They hunted together. Charlotte steeled herself for the kill, sad but resolute. "It never gets easy," Jed told her. "That's what keeps us human." As tensions built, arguments flared. "You think I'm blind to how you look at me?" she'd challenge. Finally, barriers broke. "You're already half in love with me," she said. Their kiss was 15 years of loneliness crashing into solace. Fierce, healing. But reality intruded. The storm broke. Riders approached.
3 men. Peyton, polished and venomous, with hired guns, he'd traced her, forged warrants painting Jed as a killer for that Kansas fire. "She's my property," Peyton sneered. Charlotte stepped out, chin high. "I'm not going back." Guns drawn, shots fired. Jed hit one. Charlotte disarmed Peyton with a bullet to his hand. "You threatened the man I love," she said coldly. Using wits, she threatened scandal, diaries of his abuses, bribes. Peyton, coward at heart, retreated, wounded pride and all. After, with the sheriff's help, truths emerged, forged papers, Peyton's fraud exposed later. Jed and Charlotte, they chose each other, married in Cedar Ridge's church, simple vows amid curious townsfolk. The cabin transformed, curtains, quilts from neighbors. They built bigger, rooms, windows. Jed bred horses. Charlotte taught kids to read. A year on, spring 1880, she rested her hand on her belly, baby fluttering. Letters from her sisters. Peyton fled to Europe in disgrace. Visiting Mary's grave in Kansas, Jed made peace. "I do," he vowed again. "No one loves risks, but embracing them." Folks, this story hits me because it's real. People like Jed and Charlotte existed in that frontier era, facing blizzards that killed travelers, arranged marriages that trapped women. History books tell of women fleeing east for independence in the West, finding strength in hardship. Jed's carving reminds me of how art heals. I've seen folks today whittle through grief. In that moment, Charlotte chose love over safety. Powerful. Have you ever stood at a crossroads, heart pounding, knowing one path means risk, but the other means regret? They chose risk, built a life, not just surviving, but thriving. With little Mary Charlotte on the way, they dreamed under Montana stars, horses grazing, smoke from the chimney, wolves on the mantle now symbols of found pack. As the sun sets on their story, it leaves me thinking, love isn't about avoiding pain, it's about facing it together. Thanks for listening, friends. If this resonated, hit like, subscribe, share your thoughts below. What's your story of second chances? See you next time. Take care.